Hey, everybody. Welcome back to a Theoryology podcast. I'm here with Tracy and Anthony, and we are going to talk today about a question we frequently get, which is, if I'm not a medium, can I still communicate with my own loved ones who have passed over? The answer is yes. That's the short answer. Now we're going to dig into a long answer. I think that it's important to start out by addressing anybody can talk to their own loved ones. You don't have to have any kind of special training. But what happens is when we're in our grief or when we're really kind of desperately crying to reach our loved ones, then we kind of miss the communication because we have an expectation of what it's going to be like. And a lot of people think it's going to be super obvious. They're going to slap me in the face. They're going to touch my hand. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to see them sitting on the couch. That could happen, but it can also be very, very subtle. So we're going to talk today about how to learn to recognize those subtle signs of the communication that you get from your loved ones. But first, let's address the quieting of the mind, because in order to realize and notice these subtle signs, you need to be in a state of mind where you are receptive. And we're not doing that when we're very actively thinking about things. Anybody can learn how to meditate. You don't have to go to classes or anything like that. But let's talk about meditation first and how we each experience it. How do you guys do your meditations?
Some days are better than others.
For sure.
But I think it's important that, put it this way, if you're of the mind that I need to sit down and, be totally silent in my mind for 10 minutes, I think that's unrealistic and it puts a lot of people off. You can sit down and be happy that you got 10 seconds of silence and you should be proud and celebrate that.
Agreed.
Put it this way, I take the small wins, no matter whether it's seconds or minutes. And I always encourage people to do that as well.
Yeah, I like that you said that because people do think, okay, I'm going to meditate. I need to do it for an hour every day. And right off the bat, do it for an hour. And I swear to goodness, the first time I tried to do it, and I was in my state of grief too, I think I lasted 30 seconds, like you said. It wasn't very long at all. But I worked my way up to 5 minutes. And then from 5 minutes, I worked my way up to eight, and then 10, and 12. And it's enough for me now today. But I did get to a point where I could do it for a good deal longer. But it's not necessary to do that just to communicate with your loved ones.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to meditate or learn to meditate. But you had said about quieting your mind. I definitely think that. So meditation looks different for a lot of folks. So it's more about releasing the expectation and then building a trust and belief that they are there communicating. So if that doesn't look like meditation for you in the quote words meditation, think of it just more as allowing and quieting your mind to be able to observe and releasing some of the expectation of how you think it should look, feel, because it is, like Carol had mentioned, it is very nuanced, it is very subtle, but you have to have some level of acceptance to what you're receiving to even allow it to be received. That's what I hear you saying in my ears, you know.
Yes, that is the summary of what I am saying. Because when we're in our state of grief, we're not really thinking very clearly anyway. And you might not even be in a state of grief. You're just at a point where, your loved ones may have been gone for a while and you're trying to figure out just how this works. But then you're overthinking as well. So it's the overthinking that gets in our way. Also, I like what you said about the expectation because I don't communicate with my people in spirit the same way I'm sitting here talking to you. There's not a back and forth out loud conversation. Of course, they don't have a voice box anymore. So the communication itself comes through differently. So that's one expectation to get rid of too, that you're going to hear voices. You might, because they can make that happen. But in general, it doesn't happen for most people I know who are talking with their loved ones. Some people will say, well, I hear them calling my name. That happens for sure. And it's happened to me. But the conversation is not a full on, I'm hearing you, you hear me, I'm hearing you, you hear me, like we're doing here. That's what I'm going to say. But also, you want to know that the communication isn't dialogue necessarily either. It's not like I'm going, "Hey, mom in spirit, what are you doing today?" Really? Okay, that's nice. And she says to me, "What are you doing today?" It's not like that. It's more about I will feel their presence, feel their energy. And I might just say, "Oh, hey, good to see you today," or "I'm glad you're here. I can feel you around me." But I don't expect a response of, "Hey, well, how are you feeling today?" More so, I expect just to feel their presence and their energy around me. It's almost like feeling a warm hug. And then sometimes I will just put out to them, "Oh, hey, I really like feeling you here with me. It feels like the time that we went to the beach and we just sat in each other's presence and it was really nice. Remember that?" And I'll bring up something, just reaffirm a memory for me. And that is a form of communication. Sometimes I'll just ask a question of spirit. "Hey, I'm going to the store. Do you want to go with me? Show me a sign when we get there." So, how do you guys communicate with your loved ones?
Well, I mean, when you were talking about the conversational, I was thinking about I'm typically like going a billion different directions at once, even if I'm sitting still. So my mind is always kind of all over the place. And when you brought up the conversational, it's funny because I was thinking about when I communicate with Joe, my spouse that's passed. Often it is like a dialogue, like full sentences back and forth, and I just giggle. But that's when I'm in full allowance. Now, if I'm doing like a lot of other things, or he needs to say something to me, at least this is the way I'm perceiving it. If he needs to say something to me that maybe I asked 2 hours ago that I wasn't too busy brained to receive, it'll pop in when I'm doing chickens or curling my hair. But if I'm just relaxed and I'm like, you know what, this is happening, blah, 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 what do you think? Like, I'll literally hear him tell me what he thinks, like the whole thing, like we're talking. But it brings it back again to a meditative state because I'm not thinking about anything else. My mind is there with it and it is very flowing, conversational. Another thing I connect with is automatic writing. That's another way. And that's kind of a good tool I find to connect with my loved ones that get me out of my own way because I can literally write a question to my loved one and then just start writing the answer. And then maybe it'd be me. I know it's me answering it at first, but the more I do that and allow, then I'll actually get answers that I know don't come from me. So I feel like there's not just one way to connect with loved ones, but it's more about finding out like who you are as a person and how you work through your everyday life in your human life is going to be the best clues to tell you your best ways to receive communication from your loved one because you're naturally wired to, for me, writing. I'm naturally wired to listen. I listen to books, I listen to podcasts. So conversation with Joe and I is very much who I am as a person. I listen to things. Maybe like Carol, you've mentioned before, like movies in the past, like, you and your son like similar movies and songs. So you may get songs, and that's a form of connecting with
Mm-hmm.
your loved one because you're very into music and you
Mm-hmm.
shared that. So yeah, I don't want anybody to feel like they should be in a box of a certain way. But I know, like in your classes, you teach a very good foundation to get you to have the allowance, if you want to talk about that. But maybe Anthony should tell us what he thinks first.
It's just as you were talking, I was like, yeah, so there's loads of different methods, and I always think people should find what works for them, right? If they can't do meditation, well, then try the automatic writing. Even from our science episodes, all of those signs and stuff, they're forms of communication. So communication doesn't have to be verbal. And that's what I think I'm more drawn to, let's say, is I spend loads of time in my head anyway. So I
Mm-hmm.
will talk aloud to spirit in my head. And then, like you said, Tracy, if you're quiet enough, you might hear the response, right? But I think people also need to start paying attention to their other senses. And now, to be fair, it does take time and you have to build up trust for it. But like you can send out a thought to a loved one and you might suddenly feel a particular emotion. There's the other thing that you might know that they said something back to you as a response. But of course, as soon as you get it, the skeptic then in your head or the logical brain will pipe up straight away and try to dismiss it. But then I always think that's sad because it's like you had the communication exactly what you wanted, and then it's like the ego pops in and just bursts that bubble for you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That tool is so internal to us. It literally just have a thought in your head and your loved one will hear it straight away. But it's just, are you in that receptive state to hear it? And then even when we do hear it, we often dismiss it. So like that's what I'm saying. You can have all this communication, but a lot of it comes down to trusting that communication because even the
Yeah.
signs, we can dismiss signs.
Clients will always say, like, tell my person I said hi, tell them I love them. And it's like, they hear you, they hear you, they know it. We just want people to feel confident about that at least, right? That your
Mm-hmm.
loved ones do hear you when they're just a thought away, a word away, a feeling away. They're right there. You don't need a medium to connect on that level. And Carol talks about that in her classes. She teaches for people to connect with their loved ones, which is really great.
Yeah, and I like what both of you have said about how you communicate with your people in spirit, which is different from mine. Like Tracy's doing it in a meditative state and with writing it. And I'm just going about my day. I don't bother to go to the meditative state to just, like Anthony said, throw out something in your head. I do that all day long. I don't even need or expect to hear an answer. I just like kind of talking to them, knowing that they hear me, and I'm just blathering on because then I don't know, it's kind of like talking to your bestie and they let you talk all day long and about whatever you want to. I feel
Yep.
like, wow, I have this freedom. I can say whatever I want to. Nobody's going to tell me any different. Anyway, I just liked that conversation.
Yeah, I talk all day long too, but if I'm doing also my bills and feeding chickens and yelling at the puppy, like I'm still talking to Joe. Sometimes it's yelling, yeah, if I'm doing the dishes, but oftentimes I don't mean I'm actually sitting and meditating when we're having like the full-on fluid conversation. It's more of
Mm-hmm.
I'm more relaxed and I don't have 500 other things going on, but because I'm a medium or whatever, and I have the belief that they're always there, the conversation is like sometimes even in the middle of the night. So I share that with you, Carol. Like I'm just randomly saying all things,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not open to an answer or a response if my brain is focused on 500 other things, if that makes sense.
There's two words, like listening to the two of you, right? You trust that the communication is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just allow whatever to be. So that's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
You're not always expecting a response, yet sometimes you're busy going about your schedule and you're rambling, and then you suddenly get a thought
Hmm.
in that is a response, and then you just allow that to happen, right? So in other words,
Yeah.
you're trusting the whole communication, but you're allowing anything to happen. So there's no expectation. In other words, you're not cutting yourself off or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just two factors to point out that I think will help people.
Yeah. I like it.
And then as far as Tracy, you were talking about movies and songs, for me being signs, the way I do that is I listen to the lyrics. So if a song stands out to me, it's for some reason, or I'm hearing it over and over, then I pay attention to, well, what lyrics stand out to me. And I've even gotten to where I will look it up, I will Google lyrics to whatever song has popped into my head because it might be a song I don't know all of the words to. Then I look at it and I'm drawn to a particular line or a stanza, and I think, that's the message in that. So I think I really like songs as messages and communication
Yeah.
as well.
You know what I really like? Because we had the episode on intuition,
Mm-hmm.
and I love how the fact that even this, working on communicating with your loved ones in spirit, you can use your intuition for that. So not only then do you benefit from, let's say, practicing with your intuition, communicating with your loved ones, but that will spill out across your life and into everyday stuff, just like we spoke about different benefits of it in the other episode.
Hmm.
That's a good point because people doubt, like you said that earlier, people doubt
Hmm.
that they got that communication right back. But think about how you feel in the moment. Do you really feel like they're ignoring you? Do you really feel like they responded? And you want to get yourself to that point of trust of saying, of course, if I'm talking to them, they want to respond back to me just like they did in life. So be open to, well, I had a little itch right there after I said that. Was that them? I don't know. I don't think that was enough of a sign. Why can't it be a sign or a communication for you if they're just kind of tapping you on the arm to say, hey, I heard you? So we can't have the expectation of it can't be this, it can't be that, it has to be this, it has to be that, because it's not likely to be any of the things that you think it's going to be.
I like that you said feel there because, a while ago I said that you should start exploring your other senses.
Mm-hmm.
Even that, like I often tell people, let's say, who will dismiss something. I'm like, yeah, but what was the first thought you had? Because the second
Mm-hmm.
one that dismisses it is the ego coming in. So what was the first thought? Or it's similar to that. When it happened, what was the feeling you had? If you felt like immense love, but then suddenly that thought popped in and says, actually, maybe that wasn't them, you can dismiss that immediately because the
Mm-hmm.
feeling is what was correct then at the start. I think those little examples are what can help people to start playing around with their other senses. So, in other words, oh, I know that I had this feeling at the start, therefore I can dismiss the skeptic that has now popped into my head.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not feelings that lie to you, it's your mind that lies to you.
Yeah,
Yeah, your mind will lie to you. I mean, it's really important, in the human experience to utilize your mind, but it's much better if you have the balance between your mind, body, and spirit, right? And that's when you have more of a flow in anything you do, and this included. I think there's a lot of stuff posted on media about the right way to do X, Y, or Z, and this isn't possible because of X, Y, or Z, or A, B, or C. And the biggest part of connecting with your loved ones in spirit and feeling that connection is trusting yourself, which goes back to Anthony mentioning intuition. So building your intuition is only going to help you because that may be what makes you notice a nudge in order to open the communication. If you're in tune with your intuition, you're more likely to notice a sign or something that comes in, which will allow more flow, which will build more trust, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so feelings are very important to communication. And it's kind of how I start when somebody asks me to show them how do we communicate with spirit. So my way of teaching people how to communicate with their own loved ones is first you want to learn to how to meditate and be able to quiet your mind, even just a little bit to be able to do this. But once you get in a state where, okay, I know how to quiet my mind for at least a few minutes, then one day sit down just with yourself, close your eyes if you want to, and take stock of what's going on around you. How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling mentally? How are you feeling spiritually? Right? There's the mind, body, spirit. But also pay attention to what you're hearing. Are you smelling anything? Maybe you're tasting something. And if your eyes are closed, you're not seeing anything, but you can visualize the room around you and know that that's your conscious state right there. You're paying attention to what's going on with you. Then you can invite, let's say, your guides and angels, spirit world. Don't invite your loved ones just yet because the purpose is to recognize the energy of spirit first. So invite them to just join you, come close to you, and then you want to pay attention to all of those things that you did before. Take stock of all of that again and notice if anything has changed for you. So as spirit comes closer, maybe you feel something physically. Maybe the room got hotter, maybe it got colder. Maybe you feel something physically in your body as well of, oh, well, now I need to scratch my nose, or I feel like there's tingling in my on my hair or ringing in my ears. Those will be signs that spirit is near because you are sensing and feeling their energy. You're sensing and feeling their presence. It's very small. Feeling that little tingle is a small thing, right? Feeling the temperature change, maybe a little more noticeable. Maybe it's something that all of a sudden you hear that you didn't hear before. Some people report that they see colors, even with their eyes closed, that they didn't see before this happened. So be open to any kind of changes that happen. And then you could say, okay, spirit, I've got that. I feel that. I see that. Now step back a little bit and notice that those changes will disappear. They will go away. Something else will change. do that exercise a few times in a row, and the changes might be different every time, but there will be changes because that way you're teaching yourself to recognize those subtle signs. And by doing it with your angels and guides or other spiritual beings, you are trusting that that is really happening. And when you get to that point of trust, then invite your loved ones in one at a time at first so you can recognize the changes. And when you feel some of those things, see the colors again, temperature changes, whatever it is, then you can have that trust that, wow, my person is here. And then just have that conversation with them in your head, out loud, in whatever way you want. Do the writing, just sit and be in their presence. Know that it's true, know that it's them, and allow that to happen for yourself. So that's what I would recommend for a start in learning to communicate with your own loved ones.
Everyone can do it. Like, I have no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of them building up their own confidence, right? And
Mm-hmm.
trusting in what they're getting. I was thinking of the story that I told in the other episode about, so I'm not going to tell you the story. Go and find it in the other episode, but I'll tell you the gist of it in the sense that I was sad. So then I asked my loved one in spirit to change my emotion, make me suddenly not be sad. Now that's a bit of a task for them, but at the same time, as soon as I said it, like you said earlier on, there was no conversation flowing to me afterwards. But what it is a joke suddenly popped into my head that then made me laugh. Then, of course, the skeptic would pop up and be like, no, no, that didn't just happen. But my point is, I went and trusted with the original emotion, right? The original feeling. So I always tell people to do that if they are learning with the process. In other words, they're kind of setting their loved one a challenge, but at the same time, I don't doubt their loved one can do it. That's something that they can observe, right? They can observe that difference, that change.
Mm-hmm.
But also with that, I just want to add, all of your intelligence is not in your brain. It's
Yeah.
distributed throughout your body. And I often think that you have two brains. You've the one in your head and the other one's in your heart. So you need to learn to basically be able to listen to both of them
Mm-hmm.
because your intuition and everything like that is being guided, let's say, by your heart brain. Whereas it's that skeptic, that voice that pops, that's the mind, right? It's the human mind, the ego. So it takes practice, but like everybody can do it. I don't doubt anybody. And then allowing it to happen and trusting it.
Mm-hmm.
And in your example, like you released the expectation because you were thinking, well, how's he going to do? You were more like, wow, is he going to make me laugh or whatever? And then the joke came in. So it also, the way you described it a couple episodes ago, you were surprised by it, which then made you laugh. So your expectation of what you were wanting to happen or what you figured would he would try to do must have been different for it to catch you off guard and then make you laugh. So he achieved that. And that brings me to think about back to trust and expectation. I feel like we're all repeating that. But there's one thing that like when people get excited about connecting with their loved one in spirit and they tell others and then others are like, oh, what is that? Like I don't believe that, or that doesn't seem like they're talking to you, like prove it or whatever. And I want people to feel like you don't have to talk about it. I feel like it's sacred. Like you're going to find safe spaces with people to talk about this stuff. But as you're building your trust, it's probably not a good idea to talk to Aunt Marge about it because she might be like, no, you know. So I just want to encourage you that the audience, it's okay to have this just with yourself. And if you do find other people that are on the similar journey, then discuss it because that can build it. But if you're looking for confidence, you probably don't want to put it out there to the universe as you're doing that internal work. I don't know. It's just like a thought that came to me.
It was funny you mentioned confidence because that's exactly what I got from that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I always use that example because it's so easy. There was no meditation, right? I was just in the moment, blah, blah, blah. And then that happened, and suddenly it's like, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, and I think one of the main things like people always get caught up in other people validating things for them to find their own worth or their own value. And I think part of building yourself spiritually and able to connect, in a spiritual way with anything is trusting in yourself. Practice not telling anybody for a while until you get a little more confident, or just sharing it with somebody who's on a wavelength to accept it, because it can be pretty magical to share it too, but you have to be in the space of not giving a flying squirrel what others are going to say about it.
It's much politer than I would have said.
Yeah.
It's going to be a different experience for everybody. We've said that. I think that's why maybe people doubt themselves too, because they've heard something about somebody else talks this way, somebody else hears the actual voice of their person, somebody else gets the automatic writing. It's going to be different. It's going to be personal in the same way that we all in our human lives communicate very differently with each other. So you have to understand that and realize it's not going to look like everybody else's experience. And that's another reason you can keep it to yourself, or you may want to at first, because again, you don't want to be the cause of your own lack of confidence, right? So something to note.
I just want people to feel confident that they can do this, and it's not a checklist like Carol had mentioned. It's different for anybody. So it's more about acceptance, allowing, trust, building that, and quieting the mind, the monkey mind, or the flying squirrel mind.
And I like that you said a while ago, Tracy, you don't have to seek validation from other people.
Yeah. And validation isn't bad. Like we all need validation as a human. And even with mediums, like we get readings from people to get validating because sometimes we're talking to our loved ones so much and we're wondering if they're hearing it. Maybe you're having an emotional day and you're not trusting it. Mediums, bridge the gap for that. And that's amazing. So it's not that validation is bad, but as you're learning to trust those feelings, like Carol described, going through the feeling, the sensing, the tasting, and sitting with yourself and learning what your emotions are and what's outside of you, that's going to help you really fine tune to notice when your loved one is having a conversation with you in whatever way, whether it's through a hug or a sentence.
Yeah, and I have a little secret for you guys. Everybody's a medium. Surprise.
What? Tell me more. Oh, that's another episode. Sorry.
You mean I get to have a conversation with my loved one and be a medium too? All for $19.99? No, everybody is a medium. You are born with this ability. You don't need any training. You don't need anybody to tell you how to do it. We've given you a few ideas to help you quiet your mind and experience that, but you can communicate with your loved ones in whatever way you can. I do want to say that sometimes people feel like they want to go and light a candle. They have a special altar for their person, or they want to go sit on a special bench outside and kind of have a place that's more meaningful to them to start the communication. Perfectly fine. You can do that, but you're not limited to that. So just keep that in mind. And with that, I think this was very meaningful episode to us because we were all you at one point and wanting to communicate with our loved ones ourselves and navigating how to do that. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Arrivederci.
Lord.